Hey, a very good evening to one and all, and welcome to the Melvin.tv Melvin Live Show. Where we talked about building this 1%, 1 million all digital business. Now, the, there are a few things that I would want to share with you here going forward because we are into the last quarter of 2020. And so, what I really would like to do is to be able to kind of take you through this whole process and have you start implementing something for yourself because there's just so much you can watch. I would really want to encourage you to do that. And so, to help you get started, what I would like to do is that going forward in the next couple of weeks, I will be sharing with you everything that I am experimenting and giving you the lowdown of each and every step of it, right? So I've written it all here in my notebook, and I can't wait to share with you in terms of what I have implemented, what I have discovered, what it's doing well, and what it's not, right? So that's something that I would want to let you know. Now, the other thing is that um, I would want to also invite you to check out my website, and that is melvin.me, right? melvyn.me. Now, in the next couple of weeks, we will be implementing a few things, so make sure you check it out yourself. And come November 1st, I will be launching the newsletter where I share all the ideas and tests that I have carried out in the process of building this 1%, 1 million all digital business. Now, I must say that the journey hasn't been all rosy. There are lots of ups and downs. There are times where I feel like giving up, and there are times where I know that I could do better. But all in all, I think the entire process itself, the entire journey has definitely helped shape me in many ways more than just in terms of work. And so, that's something that I really would like to be able to share with you here. Okay, so um, for today, I want to get into the system that I implement because on Monday, we talked about the idea of the system, how we go from anyone who's a lead to a prospect to a customer. And then on Tuesday, that's where we talked about the strategy going forward. What are some of the content that you can create to bring people forward to the next level itself? And then on Wednesday, we talked about the books that kind of help shape the way I think about systems. And then yesterday was when we run through this six-figure flywheel. And so, all that in perspective, today I would like to share with you the exact system that I have put in place for myself. Right. So, let me backtrack this a little bit and give you a little bit of perspective. So, the very first course, the very first online course that I put out was a complete disaster. Why? Because after I spent months working on it, and when I put it out, no one bought it, right? And despite my friend's best effort to promote it to his list itself, there was still no takers. And finally, I had to pull the plug on the entire project itself, acknowledging that it has not gone the way that I've expected it to be, but not willing to accept it as a failure. And so that's where I started to learn what went wrong. So I spoke with a few people, including one of them, it's my mentor at that point in time. And the main thing that I got out of it is the following: never put out something until you have validated it, right? So never put out something until you have validated it. And sometimes it's like a chicken and egg thing, because you would say that if I do not put out something, then how do I validate that, right? And if I do not validate it, then if I do not put out something, then how do I validate, right? I have to put out something so that I can validate that. But what if you put out something and nobody buys it? Like in my case, what's it going to be? And so this is where the whole idea of the minimum viable product comes into play. Now, the minimum viable product in days of the past would be what we call the FA. So, in manufacturing, specifically in precision engineering, what we call the FA is called the first article. So, that is like a prototype that you would fabricate and you would produce to show it to your customer, and then for your customer to do some testing and to see if whatever you have been able to fabricate, is it something that meet that expectation. And once they give you the approval, that's where you go into the mass production of that particular item itself. So borrowing from the engineering, the precision engineering parlance itself, the first article, essentially it's a low cost prototype of the actual thing. And so when you think about validating and you say that, well, if I don't put out something, I do not know if people want. But what if I put out something and I spent all this time and money and effort and then no one bought it, right? So this is where the idea of the minimum viable product comes into play. Now, in the past, in order to come up with a minimum viable product and to put it online and to be able to at least sell it or at least validate that people actually wanted it, this could be quite a costly endeavor itself. Because for the most part, I think many of us here are not people who can write codes. You probably can't design your own website. And even if you can, you're going to take a long time doing that. So you're probably better off getting someone else to do that. Plus, in addition to that, you have to build this entire system to test and then to determine if people actually wanted it. So not only that the cost was high, the requirements to put out a minimum viable product requires you to have a set of skill that currently, from my own experience itself, most first time course creator, that is not their forte. So this is where we are now in this situation. We're now in this juncture whereby we have the tools available. And not only do we have the tools available, we have it in a very economic, in an economically way, right? So you do not have to spend a lot of money to create something, to create a website. In fact, what you could do is you could essentially use some of those existing platforms. That's one way. And the other way is that if you choose to go down the route of creating your own website and setting up this entire process itself, you could actually leverage this thing called no code tools, right? So, no code tools essentially are like, drag and drop. Okay. So, if I could give you a little bit of perspective, back in my days when I was in university, in order to run a regression analysis, I would actually have to write lines of code into a computer program, and if I get the code right, if I get the lines right, my regression will run correctly. But if I just miss out one parenthesis or one comma or one period, that in itself could screw up the entire program itself. So the level of precision and the level of knowledge and the level of technical detail that we have to look into when running a regression requires a lot of energy, focus, and essentially man hour. Now, I always remember the next batch of students that after me, they didn't have to use the software that we use. In fact, they use a GUI, graphic user interface software to do all that. So instead of writing the codes, the line of codes just to run a regression analysis, all they need to do is to click a few buttons and the computer would essentially generate it for them. So think of those days where you have DOS, where you have to type in a series of commands before you could actually access the file directory compared to right now, right? Where just to get to a file directory, all you need to do is just to double click on the folder and it will take you there. So in the past, you need to know the codes in order to get to the file directory. Now, all you need to do is click a few buttons and you're there, right? And you don't have to fuss over how many characters you could name the folder or the file and all that different extension and all that stuff. You do not need to fuss with that. So it can enable you to do things really, really fast in an efficient and economical way, right? So the idea with no-code tools essentially is this. In the past, if you want to build a website, you need to know HTML, right? You need to know JavaScript, you need to know CSS. So if those things sounds even foreign to you, then obviously, you probably would need a lot of help to create a website. But today, in today's context, you have tools, right? Like yesterday we talked about MailChimp, and there are other tools out there that allows you to essentially just drag and drop. So if you want your website to have the first part when people land on it, the first fold, you want it to be a video, all you need to do is to click and drag and drop onto that canvas and put in your YouTube URL, and the the software would actually do all the heavy lifting for you, writing all the code in the background for you. And but for you, it's just drag and drop, and voila, the YouTube video would appear on your page. So those are no-code tools, and no-code tools has allowed people like you and I, right? People who either do not know coding or do not want to waste time learning coding, but probably do not want to hire someone to design a website for them. Now, this set of tools are invaluable because right now you can do it and you don't even have to write a single line of code. All right. So, right now, this has made it possible. And because of that, many of these tools are, in fact, very, very cheap, cost effective, or some of them are even free. And so today, what I want to share with you is the system that I have put in place. Tomorrow we'll talk about the tools, right? But today I want to speak with you about the system that I've put in place to help me in my online course business. So during the lockdown, I was looking at different ways of earning revenue. So one of the things that I did was I essentially went out on LinkedIn and I start talking to people and asking them what are some of the things that they are struggling with, what are some of the key challenges, as I've showed you previously. Now, once I have ascertained that, then I go into a process of finding or putting together a piece of content that is able to help address their challenges. And so that's essentially what I did. And I even went one step further because remember, I told you the objective was to find ways to earn an income. And so I went one step further and say that, what if I'm able to give people an in depth level of specificity rather than just talked about it in broad terms, right? For example, instead of just telling people, well, you need to know what your audience are struggling with in the detailed format, what I would tell them would be you need to know what your audience is struggling with. And here's how you do it. Step one, this is what you do. Step two, this is what you do. And these are the various tools that you could use to go into that process itself. So when they get that piece of information, it is not just oh, this is what you must do, but I also talk about now, this is how you would do it. And so that was one of the key things that I did. And I started selling that as a checklist, right? The other thing that I did was because of my experience with creating online courses, and during that time, obviously, I mean, the behavior was already there prior to COVID, right? People were already looking at learning online and all that good stuff. But of course, when it comes to COVID and then lockdown, people had no choice. It wasn't a matter of preference, it became a matter of necessity. And so many people were struggling with, I do not know how to create a online course. I mean, what software should I use? How should I film it? What process should I have? What is the payment? The whole system itself, for many people, they are just not familiar with that. And so what I was able to do was essentially to help them to say that, well, if you want to create an online course, these are the tools that you will need, and this is how you would implement that. And so I managed to sell that as a course as well. And that has led me to help some people to launch their online course. So the system that I use, essentially, it's fairly simple. I have three big rocks, right? And these three big rocks are the key systems that I must have in place. So the first big rock is essentially what I call the listening pose. Now, the listening pose is essentially going into the internet, going into social media, and extracting all the problems and all the challenges that people have. Now, of course, there are two ways that you can do this. One is that you can approach people that you know, like what I did with people on LinkedIn. That's one approach that you can do. The other approach that you can do is really to dive deep, use the search function on Twitter, the search function on Facebook, the search function on LinkedIn to dive deep and to infer from what these people are saying as well as not saying, to extract and to identify what are their pain point, right? So these are the two, and these are the two that doesn't require any money. But of course, with if you're not paying, it means you're paying with your time. Now, is there a better way of doing it? Yes. And the better way of doing it, I will share with you next week itself, because that is where we go at scale, right? Because with the current format itself, as what I said, this two method, you are limited by your time because you just can speak to so many people in a day. You can just do so many searches in a day. I mean, unless this is your full-time job, you would have other things to do, right? Like, for example, for me, I have clients, projects, I have to do training, I have to look after my kids, I have to, speak to my wife. So, you know, it's not a full-time job. It's not something that I could dedicate 8 hours a day to doing that itself. And so there's going to be a limit, right? I mean, if every call I jump on is like 20 minutes, and there's just so many calls I can make in a day. So this method itself, it's it's good, but it has its limitations. So next week, what I'll do is I'll share with you the other way of doing it, and that would requires you to make a fair amount of investment, not too much, a fair amount of investment. So you need to weigh the difference between putting in the time and or putting in some money to get the same results. Right? So that's the first big rock, the listening post. The second big rock itself, it's to capture people who are interested, right? To be able to draw them in, to be able to get them to put up their hand and say that, yes, whatever you're offering, it's something that I am interested in. Now, this second part, essentially, it's what I call the lead generation. To put it very simply, this is the lead generation part. The first one is the listening post. I know what people are after. I know what people are suffering from. I find a way to draw them in. And this is the lead generation. Now, once again, this lead generation, you can do it without any cost itself. And that's something that I did for the checklist as well as for the online course that I created during the lockdown. So with that tool itself, I really didn't want to put in any kind of money because I wanted to test if this process would work and to what degree it will work and what are some of the limitations that we're looking at, right? So that was the second part. So the lead generation essentially is just putting up a landing page and putting it in front of people whom I think is going to, just give me 1 second. Now, I'm a bit of an OCD thing, but I don't know. It kind of looks funny with it too. Don't you think so? Anyways, yeah. Um, so the thing is that I want to to put up a landing page, and with that landing page itself, I would then get people to opt in. So people who are interested, they will opt in. So of course, what I do is, with all those people that I've spoken to, I would send them that link and say, hey, this is something that I have created. Maybe you want to check it out. And so this is where I send them to the landing page, and many of them would opt in. In fact, some of them, what I tell them is that, hey, since I know you, I am actually putting up this project as a test. So, would you mind taking a look at it and giving me your feedback? And I must say, in that process itself, I get really, really good feedback. People telling me what what they felt and what they felt was good, what they felt was confusing, and that allows me to kind of iterate and make adjustments from there. So the second big block essentially it's the lead generation. Now the third big block essentially it's the e-commerce part, right? This is the part where after you send them to After you have taken them in as a lead generation, the next part, of course, is you want to find a way to convert them into a customer. And to convert them into a customer, of course, what you need to do is you would need to um, make them an offer and deliver the product or the services or the goods, right? And of course, in this case here, everything is done digitally. As I mentioned, this is an all digital business. So everything is done digitally. Technically speaking, I could operate from anywhere in the world, but because of COVID, I am now here in Singapore, and I'm not likely to travel in the next 6 months. So with that, it still brings about that flexibility, that option. As long as I have a good internet access, I'm able to do that kind of work from anywhere. And in fact, one of the investment that I made is so as to make sure that everywhere I go, I'm able to get good Wi-Fi. And so, the kind of data plan that I sign up is just insane, right? And so the third part really is just an e-commerce platform. So for me, the e-commerce platform is a good LMS, right? A learning management system. In that learning management system, I must be able to put up a sales page to get people to consider my online course or my checklist. And once they reach the sales page itself, if they want to, they would be able to make the payment and get that digital product delivered to them. And so all this must be done in an automated way, right? As I shared with you about Paul Jarvis' system itself yesterday. This whole process it's automated. I do not want to have to be stuck in a situation whereby someone bought the checklist and I actually have to go into my Stripe account and check if the payment has been received, and then from there to then check out what is the email address and then send them that checklist. I mean, that would be crazy, right? I mean, if I have just 10 people buying the checklist, that would be fine. But I had, you know, um, more than less than 100 people, but still, it's a lot of work, a lot of manual work. So the LMS itself was able to help me deliver that. And so I do not have to wake up in the middle of the night and sweat over, oh no, I got 3 orders. I better send it out now, right? The whole process itself has to be automated. And so, my friends, those are the three big rocks of my system. Tomorrow, what I'll do is I will share with you um, the tools that I use to help me get there, and I think you will be interested in those tools itself. So, if that's something that you look forward to, make sure you come back again tomorrow, and in order for you to get notified whenever I go live, make sure you subscribe or you follow me on Facebook. And if this episode has been useful, please do me a favor and give me a thumbs up. And that way, I would be able to help, you will be able to help, more people discover this video, and, we can make this world a better place. All right. With that, thank you so much for watching, and I see you guys on the next one. Bye bye.